Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and good day. Let's continue with our remaining content, which is on use case specification. In the previous video, I was actually covering on use case diagram, and I've mentioned to you that use case diagram and use case specification normally comes together because use case specification is actually the reporting part of the use case diagram. Cover on that. Normally, we start with a use case. For a use case specification, we start with a description. Okay, describing what that use case is all about, who's using it, generally what are the input being received and output. Okay, so you're basically giving general idea of what that use case is capturing. Okay, normally, it's only referring to a very specific function. Okay, you don't actually combine it with other functions as it make it too complicated. Alright, so normally it's like not more than 5 lines because the detailedness of this specification in terms of the processes will be captured later on in the normal, alternative, or exception flow. And then you have precondition. Okay, so maybe there are some conditions that need to be satisfied in order to perform the use case. For example, you have to log in first, maybe you need to register first, or maybe you should be an existing member, something like that. And then characteristics of activation. It shows how the use case is activated, how does it started, who start the use case. It could be actor demand, sometimes because the user is the one that started. Maybe it's an event driven, or maybe because of time. Okay, due to time, maybe it is generated or started every month, which is called, when it's to do with time, it is called temporal. Okay, and this is the part that is used to describe the processes in detail. Okay, there are 3 types. There's a basic flow, or sometimes called happy flow, which is describing the use case as a normal flow, the usual process, okay, that should be successful in completing the task. Alternative flow is actually describing what are other options that can happen when the basic flow is executed. This is optional. Or another flow is called exceptional flow. It describes the exceptional or the error in completing the use case. It shows how the error is being handled. Maybe whenever a form is not completed or wrong data is typed in the text field, so how will the system handle the error? And then you have a post condition. Post condition shows condition after the use case is completed, more like the output. Okay, maybe the database is updated, or user is generated an ID, something like that, or any rules to be followed for that particular use case. Right? And also constraint, any limitation in handling the use case. This is an Okay, this is an example of a use case specification. If I'm not mistaken, this is a use case for authentication or login. Okay, it started out by describing the use case, so to give an idea who are the actors involved, right? And then if there is a precondition, okay, in this case, they need to be registered first. Characteristics of activation is event driven, and depending if you normally label it with an ID so that it's easier for you to trace back the requirement. And normally you write down the happy flow, the one which is normally the main flow for that particular use case. So along the way, when there is a possibility that error can happen, you can mark it as exceptional 1, or maybe during the exceptional normal flow there is a condition where an alternative or an option can be triggered. You can now label it that way because the detail of all this alternative and exceptional flow is captured underneath. Okay, this is actually showing the normal flow. So there is actually many formats on how to write it. The use case specification, there are different templates, but the one that I'm showing here is like this, whereby it's like a story of processes. What happened first and second, what are the data involved whenever they log in, okay, um, what screen are being shown, right? And then remember I will mention about A1, A2, E1, which is exceptional flow. The detail of what's happening, for example, to handle forget password is described here. Okay, if there are more than 2, you should write it more here. And then the post condition, what happened after all these processes has been executed, and any rules to be followed, and the constraint that might be applied for this use case.